All right, so you need regression testing if you're a vibe coder. So, what is regression testing? Regression testing is something that used to be a really big deal, especially for compilers, and we'll get into why. But now everybody needs to know it for the vibe because it makes it so that your code does not have the same problem again. Which, if you're a vibe coder, you know that that happens literally all the time, where you get the same problem again, because it'll the AI will basically undo a bunch of work because you told it to, and then basically revert to an old way of doing things because it has context or whatever. And because it has kind of limited perspective, right? It's based on training data, and so it has a kind of a limited idea of what to do. So, how's regression testing work? So, the first thing you probably want is a way for bugs to be reported, right? Like a bug tracker or a mailing list or something, or GitHub. And then when you get that bug, then you have a fix, right? You fix the bug. But before you publish this fix to production, you need to make a test, and that test needs to pass. And actually, you should test all of your old tests to make sure that the previous regression tests didn't fail, right? Because that change could have been a regression, right? We call it a regression in this case. So you thought you fixed whatever you thought you fixed, but then you actually caused a regression because an old issue was actually broken. So in some cases, in compiler programming, the compiler could be 40 years old, and somebody will literally make a tiny change that somebody else literally already made to solve the other issue. So in that case, it's literally the case that you have to pick one, right? Or you have to completely rethink how the code works to prevent both issues. But you're basically just going back and forth, right? So that's no good. So then once your code with the new test passes all the tests, you're ready to push. So that's how regression testing works. And an example of where regression testing would be used in a modern development environment would be on GitHub, right? So when you do a pull request, it builds all your stuff, it runs all the tests, and if they fail, it doesn't let you push to the production. The way it was done with old compilers was you're on a mailing list, and you submit a bug, and then you submit a patch, and they say, "Can I have a test for this patch, please?" You didn't, you're supposed to give a test, so you give a test together in the same patch. It builds on top or whatever, and then the tests are oftentimes were just a bespoke test environment. So it could just be like a bash script or something, and then it runs the tests, and you tell them you tested it, and then they push it to the development, and then when it's time to increment the version number, at least on the compiler that I contributed to, they sent an email that said, "Hey everybody, let's stop working on our compiler this week while we let's not do any new additions while we kind of stabilize this thing." And then they increment the number and they run all the tests on it, and that's the new version. So that's how those work, right? It's pretty basic, but in vibe coding, this is super crucial. And other ways of testing are a lot less useful. So in compiler writing, you might do something like a fuzz test. So for example, if you have a math function and you want to make sure that it works on lots and lots of numbers, and you think it might not work on some numbers anywhere in its range, right? Because it's a bit complex how it's implemented. So you just test lots of those numbers randomly, and then if you find that some of the tests fail with those random numbers, then congratulations, you found a bug, right? So that's how a lot of AI-generated testing kind of works. But instead of testing random numbers in a test, it'll actually just generate lots and lots of tests. And this is really tedious when you had humans writing tests. So another way is edge case testing. So if the function is, division, you should test what happens when you divide by 0, right? I mean, it's an edge case. So edge case testing sometimes is pretty helpful too. And I think AIs probably are trained a lot of data for that, but they might not do it automatically, whereas programmers would kind of intuitively know that edge cases are where bugs happen. So those are kind of the three main ways that I think about testing, and I feel like regression testing is probably the biggest one. And specifically with modern workflows, you want to do your regression tests every time you push your code to whatever people are going to be using, and you actually want to run them again when you move to production. And if you don't do this, then, well, if you don't use Git, then the AI will just completely, you'll spin your wheels, right? You're going to be constantly, oh, undo that, redo that, and you're going to burn tokens, and you're going to have to completely rewrite stuff from scratch once it goes out of your context window, and it's just a mess. So you need to use Git, but then once you have Git, now you can manually revert if you know how to use Git, or, well, if you can get the AI to use Git for you. But you still have the same issue with the AI. Basically, you fix the problem, you get a new problem, right? You told it to fix a bug, it added a feature, right? It's all over the place. But with regression testing, you can really kind of lock it in, right? And I feel like that human aspect where you have a human bug and then you have a human test, that's really where the value add is going to be to get your vibe code to literally work, right? So you get pretty creative, right? So like one way you could do these tests is you have a literal, if you have, I don't know, like a web browser, you actually have a literal web browser like Selenium go and click those buttons, right? So like some of your buttons, they do the vibe code thing where you click them and then they don't work because there's really no code behind the button. It's all front end. It's all just HTML. And then it doesn't work, right? So then, for that button, you just kind of go, okay, let's add a test to press the button and make it do a thing. The test is when I press this button, it changes the page, and I know the page is going to be gray, so we're going to add the gray color. So, that regression test should only fail if you, in principle, if the button works, but in that case, it would also fail if you change the color of the background, which you shouldn't really be changing anyway unless you wanted to, right? So if you wanted to change it and you went and looked at the test, and you're like, oh, it tests the background color, let me just remove that test and test it differently. So, yeah, testing was always kind of this, there was always a community of people that thought testing was really great. Functional programmers tended to like it because they had test frameworks and stuff. But compiler writers had to use tests. They have no choice. So if you're interested in testing, which you should be, because I feel like vibe coding is just like compiler writing. It's like, how are you going to do this without tests? It's insane. I don't think a major compiler has ever been written without a ton of tests. I don't even think the first compilers were made without tests. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine how you would do it without tests. It's just madness. So begin testing today. Buy now. Buy tests now.